Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Untidy. My name is Matilda Green. I'm a content creator and mum of 3 humans and 1 little Jack Russell, who you will see Hannah and Emily behind me just asleep on the spare bed, living his best life. And I'm here with my delightful co host.
Hannah Davison. I'm the co-founder and author of the My Big Moments children's books. I'm a mum to 2, and today I am dog sitting a standard poodle who I went out to an appointment before, came home, discovered that he's actually jumped on all the beds. So,
Amazing.
so that's
I
fine.
love
But
that.
he's a lovely statement dog. I took him last night to the pub, and he loved it, and people loved him. So I'm test driving a standard poodle this week, and
Great.
and enjoying myself. However, we're here today not about standard poodles. We're here to answer the call of swathes of hot, brain-fogged, enraged perimenopausal women. We've heard from a lot of you, and we hear that you are frustrated, ignored, often dismissed, and sometimes feeling quite depressed about the difficulty that you're having getting clear information and proper support with symptoms of perimenopause and from the people around you giving you your healthcare. So, in fact, I actually have a friend who has a T-shirt, particularly for this time in her life, and it just says "Not today" across the front. I was like, "Oh, is it a T-shirt day today?" She's like, "Oh, the T-shirt's been out. The T-shirt's been out a lot."
I love
Yeah,
that so
so
much.
we're so excited to bring you our guest today, who works to effect change for her patients, physically, mentally, and spiritually. A huge welcome to the show, Emily Rose Yates.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor and a privilege to talk about such a topic that's very close to my heart and I'm deeply passionate about. And particularly because, just like you said, your listeners are feeling like they're slipping through the cracks. It takes a lot for a woman to really step out and do something for herself health wise. And so when you don't get the answers, it's incredibly frustrating and it leads to a lot of hopelessness.
Oh,
And hopefully today we can cover the reasons why.
yes, and get into it. We absolutely will. But before we do, I'll just give you a little intro so that people know who you are if they may not have heard of your work. So, Emily is a naturopath who has developed an evidence based approach to ensure measured and accurate outcomes for her patients. She's got a Bachelor of Health Sciences in naturopathy or naturopathy. How do you say it?
However you want to say it, really.
Okay,
Either or.
I'm going to say naturopathy. Just
Beautiful.
going to go with that. And
That
and
really that
and
really pops.
advanced diplomas in herbal medicine, nutrition, and homeopathy. Emily works closely with the medical model, GPs, and specialists to achieve the best possible patient outcomes. And she's been practicing since 2007 and is passionate about supporting women to be the best they can be, and is an expert in women's hormones and perimenopause. So we have the perfect person on the show. Emily is also the mother of 3 boys and is particularly passionate about supporting mothers and their families to thrive. So, first up, let me just tell you, Emily, that when we did the shout out over socials for people's questions and concerns around perimenopause, we had an avalanche of responses. It was crazy. So, to
Yeah.
kick things off,
Yeah.
can you tell us what naturopathy is and how it works as an approach to health and well-being?
Yes, absolutely. So naturopathy is an umbrella term. So you have a lot of different tools and a lot of different study underneath that umbrella. So naturopathy is like the umbrella for all of it. And naturopaths' Hippocratic oath is to do no harm and to find the causative factors and treat the body as a whole. So we basically use this toolkit, which is nutrition. So we do a certificate for in nutrition. I majored in nutrition actually with my Bachelor of Health Sciences as well. Herbal medicine, homeopathy, counselling, and massage. So we kind of get these tools and we build on it to help and use to bring people in from a place of surviving to thriving. Um, there's lots of, so we are, and this, yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at the body. And I feel like we should start this really early because we are a whole person. There are so many women that come into me with burnout and, we fix the adrenals, we sort the gut out, we kind of get everything moving and shaking, and then we realize that actually there's a relationship there or there's a workplace there that's actually contributing to this burnout. We're a whole being, And so the way that a naturopath works is looks at the fundamentals like nutrition. What's the petrol going into the tank? We are what we eat. So we start with that. And then what are we thinking about? Do we need to rest more? Do we need to support certain organ systems of the body to have everything functioning better? It's like a tune-up, I suppose, for the car, just like your regular servicing. You want to make sure that you have the right petrol going in. You want to make sure that everything's working as well as possible. And I was lucky enough to work with one of Australia's leading naturopaths who trained me up on deciphering blood tests and reading ultrasounds and all of those types of things. So I've merged the two knowledges together, and I find it incredible, a toolkit to basically move people from a place of surviving to thriving. And also the data for patients really helps when they look at their bloods and they go, oh, hold on a second, I'm right in the bottom ranges and I really should be at the top, and no wonder I feel XYZ. So it's a really helpful, it's a really amazing tool. I absolutely love what I do. And I had my own experience of burnout really early on at the age of 20 and ended up with a naturopath who transformed my life. And I was at the time studying law, quit law and enrolled in naturopathy, and that's the end of it. So yeah, super lucky to find my passion.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
interesting how life throws you these sort of inciting
Mm,
moments that make you
mm,
just stop on your tracks and pivot and go, no,
mm.
no, you're just slightly heading in the wrong direction. Please,
7,000%.
please
Yeah.
turn around and go this way. So how did that burnout how did that happen for you? How did that manifest for
I
you?
mean, who burns out at the age of 20? Usually everyone's partying, burning the candle at both ends. And look, I was in a situation where I didn't know who I was. I don't think it's unusual. Moving through adolescence, I'd had a lot of bullying in high school, and I was doing everything that everyone expected of me. And I enrolled in law, and I was working in a law firm, and I was all of a sudden, my dad said, you can't leave school and have a gap year. You have to do something. And so he enrolled me in secretary school, and I thought, okay, well, that's good skills. And I learned heaps of stuff there. I loved it. So I ended up working for 3 partners in a big law firm at the time. I was 20 years old, earning $21,000 a year. Can you believe it? And taking care of 3 partners and like managing their diary 24/7, and it was a lot. And then I enrolled in studying paralegal. I was really wanted to study law, but that was really just everyone else's idea of what I should do instead of actually who I was truly at the core. And I remember just having these moments in the bus on the way in thinking, this is so weird. Everyone's like all like going scrambling into the city and then scrambling out of the city, and like eating bad food and not having a lunch break and working. I just remember thinking, this can't be all that I'm here to do. Like I just knew. And so as a result of that, I got glandular fever. I got really unwell. I ended up in hospital, chronic fatigue, all of the things. And there's a few reasons why that happened. I have the MTHFR gene, which we might loosely cover, which is where you don't absorb B vitamins very well. And I have one of the severe cases. So it's very common in burnout. And so I ended up learning about all of this. Mum sent me to the family naturopath. I did a whole bunch of therapy to unpack the bullying. She taught me how to feed myself and eat well. She taught me how to take care of myself. And I was like, that is what I want to do. So that was like a pivotal moment. And I always say to my patients when they're in absolute crisis that this is a breakdown to break through. There's something amazing on the other side of this. And we've probably been ignoring the signs up until now. So it's a really,
Mm.
Oh,
amazing way of
well,
reframing.
and it sounds like that your mum was quite clued up on that sort of thing too. If she recommended you to go to the family naturopath, like not many families have a family naturopath, right? Like that's awesome.
Yeah, they were real hippies, very progressive, my parents. And they started the first health food store in Lura in the Blue Mountains. That's where I'm from. And they were the first to provide like goat's milk and local eggs and like all of the bulk foods. They kind of set that. They bought the old bank there and set up a health food store. And we were like homeopathically immunized, and we had homeopathy. We always went to the naturopath. So it was definitely a part of our lives. I'd certainly gone very much in the other direction in my adolescence. I was a ballerina and I was smoking to stay skinny and doing all the things that was just absolutely ridiculous.
Hmm.
Laxatives, all of the things. I totally ignored that part of our lives. But then I circled back, and that's what I'm going to tell myself when my kids do all the same things. That will circle back.
I think about that sometimes too, and I'm like,
Yeah.
if only you knew,
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's so important to keep that in mind. So when we're like, when our children are doing this, just remember we did too, and now look where we are, and it's going to be
100%.
okay.
Yes,
And I was
100%.
locked on to doing the opposite. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
was really, like, testing that right out.
And it is like, it's such a time of experimentation in that period of your life, right? Where
100%.
you're like, I'm going to rebel against what my family thinks is best.
Yeah.
And then you might just come back around and be like, okay, it is actually the best. Like what they thought is best.
Yeah, yeah. And, go and figure their mum.
So, you're an expert in women's hormones and perimenopause, which is the key reason we have you here with us today. So, many of our listeners are frustrated about not being able to find clear information, or they're feeling dismissed by their GPs and having to try and find their own way forward without a roadmap. And sometimes at great expense with trying different treatments and supplements and at quite a big cost to their relationships as they navigate, mental and emotional shifts. But the good news is, Emily, you're going to help us with a perimenopause handbook. So, can you define perimenopause for a start and when
Mm.
women might first begin to notice some changes happening?
Yeah, sure. So perimenopause kicks in sometime between 12 to 15 years before you actually go into menopause. The
Hmm.
issues, the reason why women are slipping through the cracks is that there is such thing, and I'm just going to call it out because I'm perimenopausal, is medical misogyny. So when we were in the 1900s, we had a feeling, we were branded hysterical, we were medicated, we were, all these horrific things happened to women because we had a feeling. Then we were branded as unreliable for testing because we are cyclic. So because of our menstrual cycles and things change and that myth is still out there, which drives me mental. I'll just speak to that for a second. Is, oh, there's no point testing your hormones because they change every day. And you're just like, uh-huh. So if you understand the actual fluctuations of it, there are times in the month where this should look like that and that should look like that. Everyone has their own normal, but you can see what's going on with someone if you test them properly. So that myth, we're going to blast that out today. So then now when then we came to the 70s and we started burning our bras and going, we actually exist and we actually want equality. And whilst I don't believe we're there yet, we're way better than we used to be. Then everyone was like, wow, women do exist. Let's start researching what happens to women. So a lot of the research, you're just like, what? Like, it does make me pretty ragey, but add the perimenopause in there, it's pretty real. Is that we've slipped through the cracks. So there's not been a good solid body of evidence around all of this. And so unless you really care as a GP, then you're not really going to do the extra study that you need. And so many GPs have come out and said, we covered it for 4 hours, just like nutrition. Of like, oh, it's a bit hormonal and it's Mirena or pill. And they're not solutions in my mind because they're not dealing with any of the causative factors. So there's that piece. Then perimenopause kicks in 12 to 15 years before we actually go into menopause. So, and this is where the fluctuations are the most massive. So they're like Mount Everest of hormones, up, down, up, down, up, down, as the ovaries are starting to close down. Way more than adolescent. So there's no other area in pregnancy where we fluctuate to the extent that we do in perimenopause. And so back in the day, our mums went to the doctor. And they were like, "You're still cycling. You're all good. You don't need any help." So perimenopause wasn't really even a thing until more recently. It was come to me when you've stopped bleeding. So the menopausal piece is when you've stopped bleeding for at least 12 months. You haven't had a cycle. And that's usually average age 50, 52. But these perimenopausal symptoms can start anywhere from 35 onwards. I've got a woman at the moment, 38, going into menopause, and that's all genetics and stuff like that going on. But that can happen earlier. But in the meantime, as these ovaries are starting to close down, there are these specific hormones that are fluctuating. Nowhere else in medicine do we take a hormone out of the body and go, you're good. You don't need insulin. You don't need glucose. You don't need but yet we're told as women to ride through this incredible fluctuation with zero support. So what actually have we found in this incredible body of evidence? And I want to reference my beautiful mentor, Lara Bryden, who is a research scientist, also
We've
a
actually had her on
naturopathic
the show.
doctor.
She's fabulous.
Oh, you've had her on?
Yeah,
My
Yeah.
twice.
God.
Yeah.
She's like,
Yeah,
I
she's
would just be
great.
like speechless. I love her so much. I love her so much, and we've done some sessions together, and her research has just been phenomenal because she has got this naturopathic lens. So treat the body as a whole system. Let's move away from the pharmaceuticals, which basically cut off the communication between brain and ovaries. So we're just not cycling. So we feel better, but actually it doesn't honor any of the process we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And what she's found is that what kicks it off is actually a brain and nervous system breakdown to break through. So it's less hormonal. Of course, it impacts our hormones massively, but actually starts with our brain and nervous system. And this is where women come in and they're like, I am so anxious and I can't sleep at night and the thoughts are crazy. I feel more depressed than ever and I've never been an unhappy person. And that's because the brain and nervous system tissue is basically breaking down in order to go through a massive rebuild process. And the feedback from the brain to the hormones tells the hormones what's happening. And the hormones are like, right, okay, ovaries are going to start closing off soon. And they respond to our brain and nervous system. So we used to also think it kicked off hormonally. It doesn't actually do that. So that's why there's a lot of symptoms that I can track back now with patients where they're like, I just started getting regular diarrhea. I started to feel really brain fogged and I started to feel a little bit more anxious. And there's zero change to their cycle. And that was when first the hormones are starting to subtly shift. So that's usually the first step. That will happen every 6 to 9 months. So I always recommend all of my patients get their bloods done every 6 to 9 months so that we see a baseline and then we can see how fast it's fluctuating and how to manage from that. So yeah, it's a process that where the hormones start to change, they start to change fairly rapidly. And as they're starting to decline, they peak and trough. So it's kind of like, ugh. The first hormone to go generally is progesterone. And this is the hormone that we produce in abundance in our 20s and 30s. We have nice plump skin. We feel very chill about things. We kind of roll with the punches of life. No big deal. I used to be able to just roll onto the floor and sleep on a hard floor with the DJ next to me. You could sleep wherever you wanted to. And the youth hormone, I suppose. So progesterone starts to decline, which is produced in the second half of the cycle. And we have all of this breast tenderness, fluid retention, patients reporting they're putting on 4 or 5 kilos in 2 weeks of their cycle. That's all fluid. They feel crazy, irritable. They just want to blast at anyone that comes near them to even talk to them. The sensory input is much harder because the brain and nervous system aren't as resilient as they used to be. And then heavier periods. The cycle might change, but that's usually when progesterone shifted for a long period of time. So these changes kind of catch us by surprise because we're looking for it in the cycle. But actually, there's so many other psychological women report wanting to hibernate. They report feeling really a lack of confidence, and mainly that's because of the brain fog. You forget words. I've done a Bachelor of Health Sciences and did really well at that, and I can't remember the word kidney some days, and I'm like, and I'm like asking the patient for prompts, and I'm like,
And they're like, kidney.
like,
Yes. Do you
I'm
know
like,
what that is?
the things that filtrate the urine, and they're like, you're a fucking expert. I'm like, yeah, sorry. I swear, is that okay? Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, peri-menopausal. So there's just these, the synapses are not meeting in the same way. So there's this kind of, and so a lot of women withdraw from the world. And I'm seeing women now, I understand this process in their 60s and they never really got back their mojo back. And I'm like, you were not supported enough back then to get back into who you truly are. So generally progesterone will start to decline. We start to feel like cycles shorten a little bit. Usually they'll say, oh, it used to be 28, 30 days. Now it's about 26. I'm like, oh, progesterone. Progesterone is produced in that second half of the cycle. It should be robust and it should hold us for 2 weeks. But if it's not doing that, then our cycles are starting to come further in and they're shorter, or you're getting a bit of mid-cycle bleeding. You sometimes get a really heavy period and then another bleed while you're ovulating. So it's, things start to change, but that's after a while of progesterone starting to decline. Then usually closely after the androgens start to follow. So I haven't met a woman in their 40s yet that hasn't had a few mega life curveballs thrown at them. We're the meat in the sandwich. We're taking care of little kids. We've got elderly parents. There's divorce, throw it all in there, death of someone they love or repeated traumas. So our adrenal glands are really tired, and what our adrenals are trying to do is help us survive. But usually by then they're pretty tired. We've had a lot of sleep deprivation because we've got little kids and we've had multiple children. A lot of times I see women from postnatal depletion, so all these nutrients that we lose when we give them to our babies in utero, if they're not topped up properly, then that makes the whole perimenopausal journey much rougher, which is why I do a full screen on everyone. Sometimes it is just nutrients, and sometimes it is also hormonal, and sometimes it's both. So we usually have this tax on the adrenal glands, and what the hormones are trying to do is find somewhere else to anchor it from. Our ovaries are starting to close down over time and over a long period of time, and our adrenal glands are really tired. So it's like we never need more rest, more deep quality sleep around this time. However, it can be hard to get. It's not the easiest thing. Sometimes I can say, take all the supplements in the world, do this, this, and this, have apple cider vinegar before every meals, and you need to rest. And it's the rest part where the women are like, how do I even do that? I can't remember
Where does
what
that
that is.
fit in
They're like,
into the schedule?
what? I might have to feel something. I might have to, we're so charged because we are usually generally taking care of so many other people in our lives. We have been the natural nurturers, and we get to a point where there is a limit to that, actually, which can really lead to a bit of identity crisis. Sorry, I can talk. Where people are like, I used to be able to give to everybody and have all this capacity, and I don't have it anymore. And that's the hormonal piece. Our estrogen starts to then decline, which is the nurturing hormone of let me take that on, let me drop you some meals, let me also take your 5 children, let me do all of the things, which was totally me. I've got this huge capacity, I'll do it all. And because I had estrogen flooding through my system, whereas now I'm like, that's a no.
Take your own kids.
That's a no. I'm just holding it together with what I've got going on right over here. Perimenopause. So it's a real shift. And whilst it sounds incredibly challenging, I do really want to create a message or a movement around women moving more into what I call the queen age. So it's, let's love ourselves a little bit more. Let's take the damn rest. Let's be okay with doing that for ourselves. And let's be, no is a love word, because our hormones don't support the outpouring anymore. And it's time to really come in and go, what am I here for? What do I want to do in the world apart from take care of everybody else? And I feel like a queen will call upon that and really step into that area and use it as a opportunity instead of oh my God, I can't do this and I can't do that. And not to certainly downplay the symptoms of perimenopause. They can be incredibly challenging if you're not supported. But there is so much you can do as well. There is incredible, the herbs and hormones are made for each other. They're a match made in heaven. And I believe that Mother Nature provided herbal medicines for this very era of our lives, is to come in and go, let me help you produce a little bit more of that while that's going da, 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 da. Let's also really take care of the liver pathways, which is the other part that really is impacted in perimenopause. We've generally had a lot of liver energy, which is processing alcohol, sugar, gluten, toxins. We've bombarded ourselves with a sleuth of toxins, unfortunately, with modern day living and processed foods. And so the liver can't do its job, which is about clearing hormones and regulating hormones in the bloodstream. And this is where the women used to be like, I used to drink 8,000 drinks and be fine the next day. And I have half a sip of something and I'm hungover for 6 weeks. I'm like, yeah, that's the liver gone, I'm out, honey. I'm out. And I'm doing a lot of hormonal work over here so you can forget the alcohol. The alcohol tolerance is extremely low.
That is
Right.
so interesting. Oh my
I've
God, I can
definitely
relate
noticed
to
that. I really know.
Yeah.
I'm like, now I'm just like, well, I just can't drink wine anymore. So a big night for me is 2 beers, and that's it. My body's just like, no, forget it. I'm not putting up with this. We had so many people write in with all of their different kinds of symptoms, and I want to make sure that we
Let's get
touch
to
on
them.
all of them.
Yeah.
So but it feels like as well, and just the way that you're talking about it and looking at it from a holistic point of
Mm,
view and just going, okay, I actually need to ask the world and the people around me for something different now because
mm,
I'm moving into a
mm.
different stage of my life and I can't do the things that I was doing before in the same way. So we kind of need to surround ourselves with a bit of a team that's going to support us through this transition,
Yep.
which is a long one.
Mm, mm.
And so, who should be making up that team to
Yeah,
support us? Who would you recommend choosing on your perimenopausal team?
yeah. So, hormone literate doctors are difficult to find. There are some incredible ones out there that have done extra study. The medical board actually just moved last year that they all GPs need to go into further training because they're realizing that this is not actually an area that they're upskilled in. So I would look at, and that's part of my job with every single patient, regardless if they're perimenopausal or not, is set them up with an incredible team. Because I feel like once we've got that and we're all collaborating together, we're good. So I have a doctor working with us at the moment that does all of the testing for us. So that kind of helps. I would definitely look at some kind of perimenopausal literate naturopath, and not every naturopath is literate in that. And I would also go with someone who's going through it themselves as well, because it's very different to not from a textbook than going through it personally. And then I would make sure that there's some kind of integrative GP that is hormone literate. And I do think that during this time, always in care teams need to be some kind of psychologist, counselor. There is a real identity crisis that we move through that we need support for mentally as well. And just in everyone, but even more so in perimenopause. It can be very confronting. It can be very sad. It becomes, when this nervous system and brain is breaking down, I've really felt that I'm like cleaning out the closet of all the stuff that I didn't properly process because I had little kids, and I was grieving my mum for a while. My mum passed away a few years ago, and so it was like, it's like this clean out. And I really want people to see it as that, because you're becoming better and upgraded, not because you're, this is the other piece of it too, is women, I'll throw it out there. I'm like, I think this is perimenopause. They're like, what? Like what? Like there's a real shade over it. Like there's this shame of like we're becoming barren and useless and we no longer can like bear children. And I'm like, no, this is so exciting. Like let's reframe that. This is an exciting move in the right direction for us as women.
Why do you say that to them? Like,
Because
because I know, I think just from being in, perimenopause, myself, and I do have those feelings
mm,
about like, oh God, and as much as you don't
Feels
want
like the end
to,
of something, doesn't it?
yeah, as much as you don't want to have those feelings around yourself aging, but I think because we've been so indoctrinated in what it means to be a woman,
yeah,
and how society values us as women, which is more around, desirability and productivity and,
mm,
you know,
100%.
all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, like what should we be looking forward to in our queen age?
In your queen age is like, so I've got a prayer, and if it's okay to say that, we might finish
Please
off with
do.
that. But
Yeah.
is a queen is totally in touch with her inherent worthiness. A queen takes rest just because she fucking can, not because she needs to, just because she's like, that bed looks cozy. I'm gonna lie down on that one. Do you know this self denial that I think starts really early, and I've made a pact to myself, when I find a little bit more capacity, I will go around to schools and be like, I think it starts from very early when we actually start menstruating, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, don't tell your dad about that. Don't talk about your brothers. Hide your tampon. Don't tell anyone. Like we do this like it's a shameful thing, and I'm like, did you know that they used to, in a tribal sense, we used to use that to heal everybody in the tribe? Period blood was a healer. It's like we used to put it on if we put it on plants, they thrive. Try putting it on your fiddle leaf. It's like there's all these like incredible benefits to menstruating, and that is our like superpower. And so I feel like that's shut down from the very start. We're not really celebrating that in little women or little girls. we're not, there's whole shade over the whole cycle, and then this is just the end point of it. I'm like, this isn't new, is that we need to step into more of our power and go, even with my 3 boys, like, they see me bleed, they've always been in the bathroom. Oh, you've got your pyramid, mum. I'm like, yes, how cool is that? He's like, Mummy, I think there's a bit of pyramid on the toilet. I'm like, oh, sorry, mate, let me wipe that up, just like I have to wipe your piss off every time I sit there. And I'm like, sorry about that, mate. And he's like, is that hurt? I'm like, no, it is so awesome that I can do this because I made you in my womb. Like, and I can only do that if I bleed every month. So it's not an ouchy blood like what they associate with. It's a really powerful blood because I want him to be a sensitive new age man and go, oh, you've got your period. What do you need? Like, exciting, great. Like, not have all of the stuff stuck to it. And so I think that we can turn this, and of course there is definite grief, and not to say I haven't felt like, oh my God, that's it for me. Like, I really wanted a 4th baby. We're not there yet. It's not going to happen now. That still is that's a work in progress. Like, it makes me feel really sad. But there's always so much more on the other side of this. And that it's probably time for me to step into the queen of version of me and have a rest instead of breastfeed a baby every 2 hours. It's like, it's time. It is our time to be what we want to be. If you look at the most successful women and all of the millionaires, billionaires in the world, 40s and 50s, it didn't happen in the 30s. And there's no coincidence to that, because all of a sudden it's like, and I would love us all to be unfuckable in a way of like, nah, sorry, no, really good boundaries, because we're not in a washing machine anymore of like really taking care of everybody else. We can still lead from a beautiful heart-centered place, but we have better boundaries, and it's like, no, not that behavior is not okay anymore.
Yeah, I like that. And
I love that.
the I actually had a friend recently say, she was talking about, I don't know, probably dating, knowing me. But she was like, why don't these guys realize that women are the portal between heaven and earth and treat them accordingly? Because that's what you are. You bring a baby into the world. You are a portal for that soul between heaven and earth, between the spiritual experience and the human experience. And then I think, like with Queen Age, I sort of look at it like that's your place. That is a place of leadership, and that is from the place where you deliver wisdom and knowledge. And
Yes.
being done with I mean, like that, it takes a lot out of you having children and raising children. And that is kind of also a pause on your life in terms of how much you can deliver in a different creative space.
Absolutely.
And how
It's a
much you can bring to the
sacrifice.
world. And I think then, in the Queen Age, you're actually able to then go, okay, and this is what else I can bring forth. Yeah.
Oh, and I just love hearing you talk about it, Emily, and how you're honoring all that comes with that, like the emotions where you might feel a little bit of grief, but you can also feel excitement, and it's all okay, it's all normal. Like a lot of the women and friends that I know that are in their 40s, it's like it's a time of, it's almost like recalibration, like they're like, just speaking for them, but their kids are a little bit older, and there's been some that have gone through divorce because they have come to a decision where actually this isn't serving me anymore, so I'm going to make that decision. And it's like they exude this kind of um empowered um aura almost, where they're making decisions for themselves now, and they're no longer kind of so day to day in the work that small children bring, but they can focus on, actually, what are my boundaries, what am I willing to put up with and have in my life, and they're really strong in that. And it's just it's really cool to see. But it's also wild that in 2024, like, I'm just learning what perimenopause is, never heard the term before in my life, before we had Lara Bryden on, and I just didn't think it was a thing. I was like, oh yeah, menopause, schmenopause, that's a
Mm.
thing
That's
to,
for later.
yeah,
Mm.
that's a later thing.
Mm.
And it's always
Mm.
been quite a scary thing, because
Mm.
like a lot of the women around me have had hysterectomies because of menopause, and
Mm. Mm.
it's been kind of scary. So I think
Mm.
these sorts of conversations are really important. But when we talk symptoms,
Mm.
they
Yeah,
seem to
let's do that.
range across all the body
Yeah.
systems, which I
Yep.
think is kind of confusing for people. So we're going to group them
Totally.
and then see if we can like break them all down. So
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
main symptoms is like, what would be the number one kind of symptoms that most people would experience during
Yeah.
perimenopause?
Um, the three top are actually loss of confidence,
Yeah.
believe it or not, sensory overwhelm, and low stress tolerance. So it's like things, and I know this now, like things that if I can't work something out technologically, I'm having a full tantrum, and I'm like, just calm yourself down, Emily. Like, you'll figure this out. Go to my 13-year-old. Can you help me with the TikTok thing? Um, so, but it's like you go from 0 to 1,000, and I'm like, I'm a meditator. I'm not like a dysregulated person overall, but I can feel this difference of like real orchestra. So you might see that. You might also see some gut symptoms. Brain fog is really rife. So
Mhm.
there are a few reasons why you're going to experience brain fog. One is the breakdown of brain and nervous system tissue. So we need loads and loads of fats during this time and protein. Fats line the nervous system. They're like the outer casing of our electrical wiring of our home. It keeps the electrical wires safe and sending all the messages safely. Fats do exactly the same thing in our brain and nervous system. So a lot of women will also go through this period of time and experience some weight gain and pull back on fats and try and fast. And it is the worst thing to exacerbate your symptoms unless you do it properly. There's ways you can do that properly, but generally it's a knee-jerk reaction from also the weight gain that happens as well. Like overnight, women also go, overnight, I grew a spare tire around my middle. And I'm like, I hear you, sister. It's totally possible.
And
Like
so
they're
we
the
think, well,
same.
logically, if I
Yeah.
fast, that's going to go because
Let's
there's no
eat.
food.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
let's go back to the things that worked in our 20s and 30s that don't work anymore. So they're just like, but now I'm working out like a demon and I don't eat anything and I'm still putting on weight. Like, what the hell's going on?
Let's talk about that for a minute, because
Yeah.
this is an issue that a lot of people have talked about, and
Mm.
it's really getting them down.
Mm.
It's
It's
really
super
getting them down.
frustrating.
Like I've got friends who like exercise every day, eat like a
Mm.
monk, really, really amazing nutrition. And then she's like, I've gained 6 kilos and I can't,
Mm.
it won't go anywhere. Nothing I do is making any difference. And that sucks. Like it
Mm.
doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't.
So why and what
Yeah.
can we do?
A few reasons. So, where do I start? So I would start firstly, so with the liver intolerance, we've touched on that. So liver is basically the caveat between your insulin levels and glucose. So you have to regulate through the liver to do that. When the liver's really tired, which it is due to our lifestyles by this time, it's working on all of the hormones really busily. So it will go, I'm busy, store it to fat. Store it to fat, store it to fat, store it to fat. The sugar cravings and carb cravings that women report in this time of our lives is beyond, because estrogen, we've found all these estrogen receptor sites everywhere in the brain. And what we found is that estrogen is a caveat for oxygen and glucose. So that whereas estrogen starts to drop, we're starving our brain of oxygen and glucose. And so the body's like, I need to find it somewhere else. And you start really craving these foods that you never really even ate before. I've been gluten-free all of my life, and sourdough basically calls my name during the day. And I'm like, I've never even cared about, and I have been that person that's like, I don't even miss it. Whereas I'm like, we can't have that in the house anymore. Like,
Yeah.
and it's because the hormones are dropping, so there's no oxygen or glucose to the brain. Estrogen's starting to decline, and so these sugar and carb cravings are next level. Then we also have the metabolic changes. So sometimes people are really inflamed, and as these hormones start to decline, the sex hormones, it also causes this new phenomenon which is called thyropause. So our sex hormones come in and help our thyroid function. Our thyroids are all about metabolism, keeping your metabolism functioning, firing your digestive acids, moving everything through. It's also about cognitive function. So often I'll see some subclinical thyroid, hypothyroid kicking off because estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone have all started to decline as well. So we need to like look at that and find out what it is. It's not the same in everybody, but it makes sense to me that people can put a weight on overnight because these hormones kind of balance for 6 to 9 months and then like there's this huge change all of a sudden. So we can just grow this tire around the middle. So looking at liver health, cleaning up your diet, making sure that it's protein and fats only. The other thing is when you're not consuming enough fats, your body will store the fat. It knows that the brain and nervous system are breaking down and it can't survive without fat. So it will make sure that it's storing. And a lot of women, we've all been 80s babies where no fat, no nothing, no fat, no sugar, no salt. Oh no, everything had sugar in it. It was no fat. We low fat everything. So that's not okay. Like don't go low fat, and a lot of it is highly processed, and we need the fats more than anything actually to shift the stored fat. It's a bit
So
of a
what
myth.
about what are the beneficial fats that
So
we should be
avocado,
eating?
nuts and seeds, olive oil, coconut oil, fish. Um, making sure that when you're slow cooking meats, that you're slow cooking with the fat where possible, getting all of those. Fish oil, cod liver oil, love it. A good quality cod liver oil is incredible for the brain. And just the fish oil in and of itself can actually change someone's mood. So the mood will be very depressed when we don't have enough oils or fats up to the brain. So that can be a really big one for people as well. So estrogen starts to decline, and what also happens is estrogen. We found estrogen receptor sites in the shoulders, in the feet, in all of the joints. So a lot of women actually will have no hormonal changes and just a lot of pain in their body. And what that means is that the joints are no longer getting good circulation because the estrogen is not available anymore. So you've got plantar fasciitis, you've got frozen shoulder, all these random things that happen to women that doctors can't explain. We actually can explain now because the estrogen receptor sites are all in our joints, heavily collected in our joints. That joints is very hard to get circulation to just generally, but that happens really well when we have good levels of estrogen, and when our estrogen starts to drop, all the pain in our body. So we have this inflammatory state, which also kicks the body into storing fat. It's like, shit, there's inflammation, we need to store. And cholesterol levels start to increase and increase and increase. So that's part of the weight gain part. The other part is also the cortisol. So I do see a lot of women in pretty significant burnout, and this puts us into fight or flight, which means the body isn't sure where the next meal is coming from. It will also it'll start storing everything to fat for that reason.
Yeah.
So that's it. A lot of women that have done a lot of fasting and over exercised, and there's a whole gamut of us that have really pushed the limits in those areas. That can be really challenging for the adrenal glands, and it's time to really nourish those up so that we can move forward with good source energy. But also, the nutrient depletion of our soil now, even our food is really nutrient void. And the quality of people's diets always comes back to some kind of dietary tweak we need to make sure that we're getting all those base nutrients give us
And it's
energy.
quite hard, right? Like it's actually, you do need to be really intentional about getting
Yeah.
enough nutrients. Like I could easily, when I really think about it, I could go a whole day without fruit and veggies easy.
Mm,
Like so easy.
mm,
Toast in the morning, maybe I'll have like tuna and rice for lunch, and then
mm,
maybe like and
mm,
honestly, like
mm,
it is quite
mm,
um what's the word, like confronting when you really think
mm,
how many nutrient dense foods am I getting on a
mm,
weekly basis.
mm,
Sweet fa, if I'm
mm,
honest,
mhm,
and so you do
mm,
have to really put a lot of effort in.
mm,
Okay, so we've got that, and then there's also there's your loss of libido and your dry
mm.
vag.
So this is, yeah.
That's quite common, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when you look at divorce rates, I'm like, I wonder if those women were properly supported in their perimenopausal period because, maybe that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Maybe he's an asshole and that's good. But also, like, the irritation and the rage is more than ever. there's no want or need for intimacy anymore because it's painful. So the estrogen also provides a whole bunch of lubrication to the vagina. So you've got this horrible, painful experience that used to be really enjoyable, and then the lack of testosterone. So what happens as a finality is testosterone starts to drop. This is where you get no drive, no motivation. You don't want to start that business. You don't want to tidy the house anymore. You're just flatlined. You definitely do not want to have sex. So usually ovulation is the peak, which is usually somewhere between day 10 and day 16. It fluctuates for every woman. That's where we produce all these sex hormones that do make us feel like we want to be intimate. And often the ovulation is a bit wonky. It's either not happening some months or happening double on the next month. So some people's libido peaks through the roof when they're flicking off extra follicles. And then the final closing is the estrogen drops away, and then the testosterone drops away, and there is no libido whatsoever when you're not producing testosterone. And we also know that testosterone has a huge impact on the brain pathways. The two hemispheres need to speak to each other, and testosterone shuts that down when you lack of testosterone. So the brain fog is really real in my patients that have got really low testosterone. And there's a relationship with the amount of androgens that we produce and our adrenals as well. So all my women that are adrenally burnt out, we look at their testosterone, it's usually on the very low end. And also the piece of self-care of like, you don't feel like being intimate when you're not really in love with yourself, right? It's like we need to really look at that self-care piece as well. But the hormones, once they've flatlined, doesn't matter how much you love yourself, you're not going to want to be intimate with anyone. And so, it's really easy to fix naturopathically, but we do get to a point in those end zones where I do reach for bioidentical hormones, and finding a bioidentical literate doctor is like pulling teeth. But I have found them and I source them, and I spent a lot of extra time phoning practices, finding doctors that will understand the difference between bioidentical and HRT. Unfortunately, HRT
So they are
yeah,
they're quite different.
they are different. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the HRT is that synthetic, and then the bio one is
Yeah.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
and
interesting.
HRT is to be used with caution. Unfortunately, when we started using HRT, the incidence of hormonal cancers went through the roof. I don't know a woman that needs any more synthetic estrogen. We get so much synthetic estrogen in our systems. So personal care products, sodium lauryl sulfate, parabens, phthalates, all of these plastics act like estrogen in the body. They attach to estrogen receptor sites. We don't need any more synthetic estrogen. We need naturally occurring estrogen, which is much more natural. It's not completely natural, but in bioidenticals, it's the most natural we can find. It's derived from sheep. And so we use those types of medicines to help with that final phase because the hormones are completely shutting down. And so bioidentical is a hell of a lot safer than HRT overall. HRT can be used with caution with the right people and the right family history. But if you have any other family histories of hormonal cancers, you would want to steer clear of that.
Oh my God. It
Okay.
actually, like, you've just touched on it now, and it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Like when you're talking about us not needing any more synthetic estrogen, because it's criminal to me,
Mm,
the shit that they put in these products,
mm,
and that we don't know about it,
mm, mm,
and we're only just starting to understand
mm,
the effects that these products can have, and
mhm,
they know, and the
mm.
products,
I know.
these big corporations know, and they do nothing about it. It
Mhm.
is just,
Yeah.
I think
Raw.
it is criminal. Anyway,
Mhm. Yeah.
um okay,
Oh,
Absolutely.
so
Even just what's in our
we've
water
covered
these
that.
days. Filter your water, guys. Make sure you get a water filter. Like they're finding traces of the oral contraceptive pill, vaccines, antidepressants in the water.
oh
Yeah,
man.
It's like
oh
we're getting a
gosh.
dose of everything.
It's a minefield. Okay, what
Yeah.
about I just want to make sure that we're covering all of the
Yes.
symptoms that have been reported.
Yeah.
What about hot sweats?
Yeah. So two things are going on here. It's the brain and nervous system breakdown, and there's a temperature regulation part of our brain. So that's a part of the brain breaking down to break through. Estrogen is also a big player there. So estrogen will help us regulate thyroid hormones. It'll also help us regulate temperature. So whenever I look at bloods, but I also listen to the woman and all of my mentees, the naturopaths I train up, I'm like, the patient always tells you what's wrong with them, so just listen to them. Like, women know their bodies better than you do, so don't assume that you know more than them. Because that happens a lot out there. So I will look at the bloods and I'll also match up symptoms. So their estrogen might be, let's say, a lowering perimenopausal estrogen might be in the 150s. That's where about 450, this is average. When we're reproducing and that we've got more than enough estrogen, we drop down to about 150. But if this woman's also got hot flushes, vaginal dryness, can't think anymore, sugar and carb cravings, putting on weight every single day, we go, well, she needs a lot of estrogen, right? But that it's not until estrogen drops below 80 that we're in that menopausal kind of period that a doctor might say, well, you don't need estrogen, you're producing enough of it. But it's not nearly to the level that we used to and that we need. So it's matching those symptoms up with the bloods and double checking and cross referencing. But estrogen is a big one with temperature dysregulation. And a lot of women say, I don't get hot flushes, but I run hot. I used to be always cold, and now I'm, much less clothing, much less doonas at night, and that's a sign that that's starting to kick off.
All right. What about
Mm.
hair loss, change in hair
Mm.
texture, peach fuzz, skin issues?
Mm. So, okay. Hair loss is generally thyroid related. And so this is where thyropause kicks in. A few things, nutrient deficiencies, B vitamins and iron. And often if cycles are changing and they're getting heavier, you're losing a lot more iron. We lose iron every single month as women. And so if that part of the perimenopausal picture is your cycle can get lighter or it can get much heavier. So I always assess that, have a look at B12, have a look at iron, and make sure that the cycles, there is enough nutrients there for them to have a really good, healthy bleed. As iron becomes more deficient, you're going to bleed more. You don't clot very well. And so it actually is a vicious cycle of you start hemorrhaging and you don't clot very well and your iron gets even lower. So there's that piece, check out nutrients. The other piece is that, and B12 and iron are all about hair. The other piece is that the thyroid is starting to kick in. So as the sex hormones are dropping away, we need to test thyroid. The thyroid symptoms I ask patients for is you will have temperature dysregulation, you will be losing clumps of hair, you'll have a thinning of hair, skin and nails, you'll feel anxious a lot of the time, and you won't drop into deep levels of sleep. So this is where the thyroid's starting to play into this thyropause, which is more like a thyroid activated menopause. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. We've got.
It really covers everything, doesn't it?
Man, I'm just looking at all these symptoms, just being like, it's just across the board. We're just
Yeah,
dealing
I
with
know.
so many things, and no wonder people are feeling really lost and
Mm.
frustrated and not knowing where to start,
Mm.
and then trying to figure it out, and
Mm.
then then something changes
Giving up,
again, and then they feel like they're back to square one, like,
totally.
and doing it while you've got brain fog. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
a
easy
lot.
becoming a queen.
No, it's not
Um,
becoming great.
okay,
Maybe
what
she did
about
come to.
like feeling like you've got a weaker bladder, pelvic
Oh, yeah.
floor, a little bit more leaking,
Yeah. So,
especially around like a period?
absolutely. Estrogen has a role in the tone of our bladder. And if we've had any previous prolapses, which I would argue most women that have had a baby have some kind of prolapse. If you look at the canal we've tried to get the baby out of, everything has had to reorganize to a certain extent. Generally, that's pretty good. And that will go back together because our hormones kick back in, but then things will start to appear again in this perimenopausal period. So um, progesterone has a role in the strengthening of the pelvic floor as well. Testosterone definitely has a role in the strengthening of the pelvic floor. Estrogen as a starting point is usually what I think about. So yeah, looking at bloods and looking at your symptoms and going, okay, you definitely need. And what's really cool now is we can use estrogen pessaries, for example. So vaginal inserted estrogen. So if your estrogen is okay and you're not showing any other estrogen signs and it's more just the pelvic floor prolapse symptoms, we can use it localized. And that's cool for me because I'm like, well, that's great because it's not going into the body every single day and we're getting that area sorted.
Mm.
Yeah, I understand that's very hard to get in New Zealand. We've had
Oh, is
reports of
it?
it being very difficult to
Mm,
get, vaginal estrogen. Yeah, so I think, part of the challenge for women is
mm,
going to be, putting your team together of
mm,
people who
100%.
are properly informed and
Mm,
who are able to
working
support you
together.
with the bioidentical,
Yeah.
what did you say? The bioidentical
Hormones? Yep.
hormones
Mm,
and, like vaginal estrogen
mm,
and supplementation and dietary advice. So these are
mm,
all the things that sort of need to come together.
100%.
And also the psychological support,
Yeah.
perhaps counseling, therapist,
Mm,
um, whatever. There's all those sorts of support as well.
mm,
So, you know, in an ideal world, we'd have access to women's
mm.
health professionals, like yourself, who are knowledgeable and
Yes.
passionate,
Yeah.
and properly informed. But that's obviously not the case. So,
Yeah.
um, how do we get around this challenge of, you know, building this team of people who are properly informed, and for those who maybe can't afford to do all this stuff privately, where do
Mm,
people go for free information?
mm,
When treatment seems to be so tailored and individualized.
mm, mm. Yeah, look, that's a tricky part, and I would love to figure out how we make it more accessible. We've tried to keep our blood testing facility at the lowest point. I don't actually make any money out of the blood tests at all. It's all just so that people can get access to them so that we can help them. Because just getting blood tests from doctors for hormones is like beating your head up against a brick wall. There are centres opening up, and I will make sure that I provide some links in the show notes. I'm not sure of New Zealand specifically, but I do have some. The Australian Menopause Centre over in Australia is incredible. They've got amazing doctors and a good team of nurses and understand the difference between bioidenticals. So I refer a lot of patients there. Um, but yeah, it is tricky. But look, I would look for someone that is advocating for women's health. Generally, if they're not and they care enough, I write fairly comprehensive letters, GP letters, because I want to educate all at the same time and send them to a team, send them to someone that will understand. They don't even need to understand the difference between HRT and BRT. I'm not going through a whole educational process there. I just use the brand names. So if they stick to the brand names, they care enough about women, they're generally like, that sounds reasonable. And look at your test results. That's zero. I had a patient the other day, testosterone should be kind of somewhere in the hundreds. It was zero 0.5. They could barely fund a
Wow.
reading. So, you can't argue with that, right? So I attach the test results. I recommend the androfen, which is the bioidentical testosterone. And usually they're like, that sounds reasonable. I'm cool with that. If they care enough, you can usually find someone. If you're sitting with someone that is, no, I don't want to test hormones, no, I don't think this is what you're going through, they're not your person.
Mm.
We unfortunately do need to, just like therapists and just like naturopaths and just like anyone, hairdressers, we need to filter through them a little bit, and don't tolerate the fact that you can't get tested what you need to test for. That is actually our right as a patient. And there's a bit of, it just frustrates me endlessly that we can't get access to our own test results, and that can be really difficult, even just the results, and that we can't just ask for whatever we want to. We should be able to do that, and that it's just keeping that advocacy up for yourself. Do it in your first half of your cycle, because in the second half of the cycle we feel much more vulnerable and like, okay, sure, whatever you want to do, don't help me then. In the first half of our cycle we can have harder conversations, be better boundaried, and be advocating. So maybe do that, book that in your
Mm.
first half of your cycle, and just advocate for yourself and filter through. So is that helpful? But
Yes,
it's
yes.
an area that's lacking, and I'm really sad about it, and I'm interviewing at the moment for bioidentical literate doctors and nurses to have in our team so that we can provide a bit of a center, and we're all online, so it's, it doesn't really matter where
Amazing.
we are, we can be accessed, but it is a massive area of lack. unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it is systemic, and it is slowly starting to change. I mean,
Absolutely.
lucky that we live in an age where we can have these conversations for free as well, and so like people
Absolutely.
can access people that are so
Yes.
knowledgeable,
Yes.
and they can get their own research for free,
Yeah.
which is pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
um, so thank you for being on the podcast. But also, what are the things women should be asking their GP for initially to begin diagnosing and identifying main issues
Yeah.
and possible treatment options?
Yeah. So firstly, getting and I'll happy to provide this for the show notes too, is a GP letter, basically what I ask for. There are specific hormones that we test day 2, which is day 2 of your bleed. Day 1 is the first day of your bleed. Day 2 is
Hmm.
the second day of your bleed. You can get them done between day 2 and 4, but that gives us a baseline of what your body's producing for the month ahead. So that's really helpful. And then there's another hormone that we test day 21. If you have a longer cycle, you can push that out to like day 24, but potentially, but day 21 is generally a good guide on where your progesterone is at. I do nutrient levels, and then I do a screen of all the organ systems, thyroid, liver, kidneys, electrolytes. It goes on. So I'm happy to give you a list, and sometimes just taking that to a doctor, they might just go, sure, that seems reasonable, no problem, let's go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I know that people are going to be going, I wonder if she does online consultation. Do you?
All online. I
Okay.
work all online. I don't have a
Oh,
practice. I don't like
okay.
vacuuming or washing up teacups, so it's all online. I've had the big clinics and I've done all the things, and now it's like, yeah, no, I'm good. Just
The
here,
less
I'm
Okay,
online.
teacups, the better. Yep, I'm here for it.
Yeah,
great.
and all
So,
my
well,
patients move around, so I've got patients everywhere, all in the world. And I do run, not running just yet, but will actually be running at the end of November, is the Queen Age, which is a low cost membership for patients to come in. A lot of my patients that have been going through divorce have found that super useful. A whole lot of women with perimenopause in the same place, having the same conversations, being normalized. And then I offer Q&As and lots of education sessions all in the low-cost membership as well, called the Queen Age, for that very reason of just like get people set up with the right team.
amazing. We do have other things we want to talk about, but just while we're
Great.
on the subject, what is your website where people can find you, and how do they follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, emilyroseyates.com is the website. And then my tag, if you call it that, Emily Rose Yates Naturopath, at
Okay,
Emily
great.
Rose Yates Naturopath on Insta. I give heaps away for free on there too. So there's always some free downloadable hormone, track your cycle. And that's one of the things for the listeners as well, is that a lot of people will say, oh, I feel depressed, but not all the time. And then we start to really put the data together in our questioning and consultations. And it's like, actually, that depression is all that second half of the cycle, which we go, oh, that's progesterone. So when we are understanding our symptoms and what time of the cycle that's happening, it gives us a bit more of a clue. So I've got the free hormone ebook that can be downloadable now, which has a cycle tracking sheet in it. Some women don't want to use apps. There's amazing apps as well, but they want to just write it down, and that's really fine too. But just get to know yourself a little bit. And I think if you wanted to do one thing for free, is just start tracking your symptoms and your cycle.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And
Mm,
we'll put all of the links in the show notes as well. So
perfect.
don't worry about writing it down on your bit of paper now, guys. We'll
Especially not
you
if you're
just
driving. You just
no,
focus on the
Yeah,
road.
yeah,
yeah, one thing at a time. We'll stick links in the show notes. Okay, what else do we need to tell women at this point? We want to talk about like, okay,
Mm,
then what happens at menopause and stuff like that, and how do
mm,
we navigate things with relationships? But I just want to make sure that we've really covered everything that we
mm,
can for women who are just like tearing their hair out right now.
mm. So I think my 5 top tips would be: figure out, get tested, have a look at your bloods, make sure you get a copy of those bloods. Eat, we need to eat. We're not growing anymore. So I'm not anti carbs at all, but we just need so much less kind of quick hits of energy. If you're on processed foods and sugar, these are free things you can do right now. You can start today. You need to pull back on the things in a packet and increase your vegetables. So 7 to 9 cups. you're going to get those nutrients in, you're going to get so much more energy, you're going to clear that phase 2 of the liver, you're going to start really chipping away at all those pathways. Gluten, sugar, alcohol, I believe should be out of there. Getting really well hydrated and focusing on protein and fats as a starting point. Protein and fats for breakfast. I just went around a women's health forum. We had 350 women there. And in the first day, they all switched over to protein and fat breakfasts. And they were reporting like so much more stable mood, so much more stable blood sugars, not craving the foods that they needed to, the chocolate at the end of the night. Because if we really carve out our blood sugars and really stabilize those, a whole lot of our symptoms are less dialed up. It doesn't change the hormones, but what it does is change the intensity of it. And when
What's
we
your
pull out,
sorry? What's your go-to breakfast?
scrambled eggs and greens, cheese, like just that's it.
Yeah.
Amazing. And no toast. Get that sourdough out of there.
Get
Is
that sourdough
that
out
what
of
we're
there.
talking? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
'Cause
disappointing, but okay, I understand.
I mean, well, how just quickly,
Yeah.
just like make it about me.
Yeah.
When so I'm just about to turn 34,
Yeah.
and I am completely obsessed with sugar, Emily. Like I'm going
Yeah.
through something,
Yeah.
and I don't know what's wrong with
Mm.
me. I can't get enough. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
don't worry about lunch. I'll just have some like chocolate bliss. But I'm obsessed, and I've
Mm.
never been like this before
Mm.
in my life. Like, is that the start of perimenopause, or could that just be like, because I'm having sugar, then I'm craving sugar, and I just
How
need
old's
more of
your
it.
youngest baby?
10 months.
Yeah, there you go. It's breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the fatigue, are they waking in the night?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
A million
So
times.
that we've done studies on shift workers, not on mums yet, but
Mm.
we need to. But shift workers, night workers, right? As soon as we're up, the incidence of diabetes is 4 times what it is in someone who's not doing shift work and awake at night. Our blood sugars are all over the shop when we're waking in the night. So I would get you to focus on protein and fats. That'll satiate you and dial down all of the fluctuations in blood sugars, which basically when you're in a high, you want more sugar. When you're in a low, you want more sugar. And
Yeah.
even the food that you're eating when your sugar's all over the shop isn't satiating. So you'll
Mm.
eat and you'll be like, oh, I really just need that sugar. I'd really like to just have some chocolate afterwards. I'd look at your hydration. So if you're still breastfeeding, you can be quite dehydrated, which will also have you craving sugar. So try and have a glass of water instead of the sugar and see if you still want the sugar. Protein and fats, hydration. Also, calcium, magnesium gets taken out of our system really rapidly in this 10-month period if you're still really heavily breastfeeding. Baby's still trying to lock in all of that to their bones, and that can really add to sugar cravings. Magnesium just carves out sugar cravings.
Mm. Oh, well,
If you've
that's
had any antibiotics, the other thing that will happen is microbiome of the gut will change. Every time we have antibiotics, pharmaceuticals, it changes our microbiome, and we're all bacteria. Our cravings basically are based on the health of our gut. So I'd also look at your gut health and see if we needed to dial down any like candida or any overgrowth in there that might be craving sugar insatiably. But I'd
oh,
say a good
that's
night's
so helpful.
sleep and you won't think about it. Do you know, it's like the sleep is the one part,
Yeah.
and
Hardest
breastfeeding
to solve.
mums are like on a track towards carbs and sugar all the time because your baby's taking so many calories from you, and so
Mm.
the fluctuation every time you feed, sugars up, down, up, down, up, down. So
Yeah.
protein and fats,
Okay.
and
Great.
when baby gets more protein and fats, they sleep better through the night too.
Oh my God, it's a win-win, isn't it? Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I feel like I'm just on that kind of hamster wheel of like feeling
Yeah,
tired, more sugar, feeling tired,
quick hit
more
of energy,
sugar.
quick hit of energy, quick hit of
Yes.
energy.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Okay,
I
that's
think a
good.
lot of our listeners will relate to that too. So it's not just about me, but
no,
anybody
No,
who
well,
oh,
I've
good.
I've
Oh,
I've got
geez.
another relatable case study, which is all about
Right.
me. But I
Oh, yeah, good.
think that I think that this is probably a very common scenario.
Yeah,
So, like, my cycle got
yeah,
really, really short. It got to like
yeah,
18 days, and I was bleeding heavily for like 8 to 10 of those days. So no
yeah.
one was having any fun,
Mm,
and also uh, let me think. Yeah, then my iron was bottoming out. So
Mm,
then my iron, because you know, um, I was just bleeding so much. So my iron was down at 25. So I was just
mm,
borderline, going to be anemic any second. So, and I was knackered. And I was just like, do you know what? Like, I feel like I'm doing everything right and I'm having this situation.
mm,
And so I decided I got rid of my copper coil, my copper IUD,
yeah,
and I
great.
decided to go with the Mirena
Mhm,
because I was just like, I actually can't do this anymore.
mm,
I just can't be bleeding like this
mm,
anymore, and I need to sort my iron out. And I think, like, as much as I would have liked to have done things naturally, I I just couldn't, you know?
yeah,
And so that's what I've done. However, I had this hot off the press. I had this interesting situation this morning. I went and saw my kinesiologist because I've now got a lot of inflammation in
mm,
my knees. They've never been
mm,
great, but I've
mm,
got this inflammation and it's not going away. And
mm,
he was like, this is because you've got synthetic progesterone now
mm,
coming into your body. So you're not making your own natural progesterone. So
mhm,
the synthetic progesterone really good for contraceptives,
mm,
but your natural progesterone would also be maintaining and healing your tissues.
mm,
And so that's not doing its job
mhm,
because you've got the
mm,
Mirena
mhm.
in.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, okay, so now, we've solved one problem, but we've created another because now I've
Mm,
got joint pain and joint inflammation and
mm,
these other things going on.
mm,
So that's my case study.
mm,
What say
yeah.
you?
Um, Look, I would start with the conversation of so when let's track right back. So when you have the Mirena or you're put on the oral contraceptive pill, you're trying to produce your own levels of hormones, but you're not. So that does impact the way the nervous system and the brain get this full recalibration. So I would want that for you at some point, but I do understand that bleeding constantly is not okay. That would be easily fixed with a bit of good quality progesterone, by the way. So that shortening of the cycle is basically you're bleeding, then ovulating, then bleeding again. What happens when you ovulate and you put good progesterone in the system? It holds the cycle out and then you bleed again.
So where do you find your good progesterone?
So firstly, B6, zinc, and omega 6s are the building blocks of that. So you can start with that, progesterone building nutrients. Iodine also has a big impact on that, which also helps with the thyroid. That will help produce more progesterone. If you've gotten to that point fairly quickly though, the other thing that's happened with the copper IUD is there's so much to this, is that the copper and estrogen feed each other. So you've become more estrogen dominant, which is also making the bleeds more heavy and the progesterone has been shut down. So by balancing those two pathways, we could have got you a much more normal cycle so your iron's not tanking every month. But now the Marina's in there, I would be really focused on reducing your inflammation that comes into the mouth, so sugar, alcohol, gluten. I would give you a really high quality fish oil 2 to 3 times a day because that's also going to lubricate the joints and help with the brain and nervous system reset that your body's trying to do underneath the Marina. But there's not a lot you can do now because we can't put a whole bunch of hormone in there because your body's going to reject it because of the Marina.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
hmm
I feel like you didn't get the last bit, yeah?
Yeah, no, yeah, I do get it. But I think I'm just like, I feel like I've backed myself slightly into a bit of a corner.
Yeah, yeah, you're not alone, and there'll be a whole bunch of listeners out there really grateful for this information. But usually, I'll get people to a point where I'm like, can we take it out and can we
Yeah.
just rebalance everything? And then usually they're like, I'm sweet, I'm good, or you go back on it. But if you have a marina, it's super important to make sure that you do have it checked. I've had a lot of dislodged numbers, causing a lot of pelvic pain and inflammation, and that you don't leave it in for any longer than the 3 to 5 year period.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, when I think about, okay, if I can't resolve the joint thing, do I think about
Mm,
taking it out and starting again?
exactly.
And and I'm open to that, but
Mm,
what I want to say, and I think women who are in a similar situation, is there is some, like, kind of fear and resistance around it because
Mm,
I don't want to have to go right back to where I started and
mm.
then, upset my system again and then have to adjust to something again. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I just feel I feel a sense of helplessness
Mm.
around it and loss of
Yeah,
control.
and you're not alone there. It would take 6 to 8 weeks to rebalance out your hormones post-Mirena, so it's not a long time. That's not like a forever thing.
Mm,
With the right practitioner, it does happen quickly, and I
mm,
think, you're not alone in that. What does that look like if I take it out? Am I just gonna be bleeding endlessly?
that's my concern.
Yeah, and but reframing it as an opportunity to give yourself that full reset at some point, and it doesn't have to be now. Sometimes there's a capacity issue, and I really see that, and I want to be super clear here because some women do need to reach for antidepressants, and some people really do need to reach for other options to be a circuit breaker. But what I want women to understand that that is a circuit breaker and it's not dealing with the underlying cause, and do the work later on if that's what you need. And
Yeah.
and work on all the underlying cause thing. A lot of people are uh, ended up in this chat the other day with a whole bunch of people with PMDD. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's a estrogen progesterone imbalance. That's as simple as it is. But it affects women so dramatically that the rate of suicide is super high with women with PMDD. They get dysphoric. They get there's also a thyroid aspect to it as well. They feel a bit psychotic. They feel incredibly suicidal. It's all really easily fixed, but this chat was going around and around in circles about how it's so misunderstood and it's blah blah blah. I'm like, no, this is the problem with hormones. Is when you get the hormones balanced, you don't have to experience that every month. That's not just some weird phenomena. That's a massive hormone imbalance that is impacting the brain. So the brain's starving. So in that second half of the cycle, depression, like anxiety, don't want to live, can't find any purpose anymore in life. That's hormones, and that's how massively they impact the brain.
Mm,
So it's kind of like I'm going on a tangent here, but it's like it saddens me greatly that women can't find the right solutions to actually do the work, the causative work, so that we don't end up in these situations where we feel backed into a corner. It's all possible, and I suppose I want to open up the listeners' hope of like find the right practitioner and those hormones are balanced. You're not going to bleed every 2 weeks. Your iron's not going to be tanking. That can be fixed
mm.
with the
Okay,
right.
so
Mm.
I think being in this situation, should I decide that, all right, I'm going to try and take it out? What I'm going to do first is set up my team and
Set
as
up
a
your
safety
team.
net,
Yeah,
and have the team of people with the right knowledge,
yeah,
and also have a game plan
yeah,
so that I feel like I've got something to go towards and go
totally. Yeah.
into with people who are knowledgeable and where there's a real like strategy to go
Mm.
forward into, and I know that I'll feel supported.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for you, clearing out the gut inflammation, you could start with that. So let's try and address the inflammation in the joints without attacking the marina. So you would do cut out gluten, sugar, and alcohol.
I mean, the alcohol's not there anyway, but the gluten and the sugar.
You got this, girl. Loads of fish oil.
Don't let that sourdough own you.
Yeah.
It's
Plain
got me.
sourdough to
It's
fuck
got me.
right
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Fish
Collagen.
oil I'm cool with. Yep. Yeah, I'm on the
This is the
collagen.
other thing. Okay, so we don't produce collagen from 35 onwards. So this also impacts our joints, our lubrication. So that some women say, I wake up and I feel arthritic for the first hour of my life. And collagen, fish oil, clean out the inflammation in the gut. That might sort your joints.
Mm,
And then we're not doing the it's hormonal thing. It could be, it may not be. I'd need to see data to go, okay, progesterone's about in the fives. That's probably not enough. We should be producing 60 to 90 of progesterone. So we could look at that, although the marina would skew the results now.
mm.
But if you had any old results, we could have a look at that. So we'd try and investigate what it actually is for you.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
cool. No, that's cool. That's reassuring.
Mm.
It's just reassuring to know, like to speak to someone who's like, okay, this is the
Strategy.
plan.
Yeah.
Here's the strategy. Here are the
Yeah.
steps, and here's
Yeah.
what's going to be involved.
Yeah.
And I think we get ourselves backed into these corners because we're just like, I just don't even know, and this is the solution that's offered to me, and
Totally. Yeah,
let's just do it because I can't do this anymore.
yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah,
And it's really, we're putting up with so much generally from those beautiful people around us that it's really hard to tolerate anything that's not going very well in your own body, I find as well.
totally.
It's like,
Okay.
yeah, no, let's make that go away.
let's make it go away. That's super helpful. All right, so we've got the perimenopause,
Yeah.
and ultimately we're going to reach menopause.
Mm,
So how do we know that we have arrived?
mm.
Um, and then all these symptoms that people are navigating, do they get resolved when we
Yeah, they
hit
do.
menopause?
Yes, the good news is if you haven't had a cycle for 12 months, so no bleeding for 12 months, you're technically in menopause. And you generally can, in that time when the estrogen's still, so estrogen will drop usually below 80 units, that's what we see on bloods, then you will have probably a petering off of any hot flushes, sleep dysregulation. We should have really tackled sleep as well. Sleep dysregulation is a big one with estrogen because you don't have enough glucose to the brain to drop into deep levels of sleep. So a lot of women are just like, that could be the first thing to go as well. Insomnia. All of a sudden, I just can't sleep anymore. And generally that's estrogen. So you might have a few petering off symptoms. Generally, I've got 70-year-olds on a bit of bioidentical estrogen. It's great. They love it. It makes them feel amazing, but just little tiny bits of it. So, and that helps with their bone density. It sorts a whole lot of the insomnia and anxiety out. And it's usually like once or twice a week. So but generally it will close off and you'll get a petering off of symptoms about 6 months, done, over.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, even the weight gain.
You need to really be moving more, and there's a combination of what's happening, which is also Lara's research of the sex hormones drop away, this happens, and then we're developing a whole bunch of metabolic disorders, unfortunately, because of the inflammation in our bodies and the toxicity and all of the other things. So you want to make sure that that's not happening too. Movement, in our queen age, we need to be building muscle mass like no man's business. We lose 1% to 2% every single year. And that impacts our brain health, it impacts our bone health, it impacts our metabolism, it impacts the way that we, uh, so many outcomes, mental health outcomes moving forward. So drop the cardio, guys. No more HIIT for our queens. It's all about weights, building muscle mass. That's what we need to be doing for ourselves.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's great. And the thought that just occurred to me
Mm,
was, eh, this is the time in our lives when we
mm,
actually need to give ourselves permission to financially
mm,
invest
mm,
in our
mhm,
health and well-being.
mhm,
Like it's worth it.
mm. You are
It's
worth
worth
it.
it.
Yeah. This is
Yeah,
your
and
time to
I
do
think
it.
it's hard sometimes to be like, oh, I don't know about seeing that, that specialist or whatever. It's really expensive, but do you know what this is? How much? Sometimes when I think about, oh God, that seeing the kinesiologist, for example, like I
Mm,
just dusted about $400 this morning.
mm,
That was a
mm.
lot.
Yeah, it is.
But then I think sometimes, what would you actually pay to not have
Mm.
that issue going
This is
on, to
insurance.
for your
Yeah.
knees to feel good? What would you actually pay for your energy levels to feel good? And then you think, do you know what, I would pay that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got to move away from this martyrdom energy of like self depreciation. Like when we are in our full sense of who we are and giving from a full cup, everyone around us benefits.
100%. Yeah.
It's like if we can't do it for ourselves, do it for your children, do it for your communities, do it for your businesses. Fill yourself up because the overflowing cup is going to make all the difference to all of your choices moving forward. And there's nothing more precious than your health.
Mm.
You can't I say to some of my burnout patients that just don't get it, they like will get them feeling so much better, and then they do the 6,000 HIIT classes in a week and come back and go, all the symptoms are coming back. I'm like, can you please stop? Like, no, like we talked about this, but the A-type personality, that's what they're used to doing. But and I'm like, put yourself in bed for 8 weeks. How's that going to look for everyone around you?
Mm. Yeah.
It's like we are
Mm.
Yeah.
so important as mums. We are in the middle of a web of communities, families. We keep the whole world ticking.
Mm.
Like, it's okay to feel exhausted. And so it's like we are so important, but when still we kind of trip ourselves up with, that's really expensive. Like, would you buy, like, have you seen a pair of Nikes these days? Like, fucking $150 for all of my kids. Like, and I was walking around with these things flapping off. I was tripping over my own feet.
Yeah.
And I looked down, I was like, Emily, this is not how you live. Like, get yourself some fucking trainers. Like, do you know? But if you find yourself tripping up with this, like, you know, if I fell over and broke my leg, how am I going to take care of everyone around me? How am I going to show up to all the people that need me? Like,
Yeah.
it's a different mindset. There's no expense on your health. Like,
Yeah.
that's the priority. And if you, and I see it like all around me of like the Botox, the handbags, the trainers, the gear. And I'm like, we don't do that because we invest in the other areas of our lives. They're all choices.
Mm.
You know, it's like, yeah.
And I think like when you feel amazing and you
Mm.
are investing in yourself and looking after yourself, then the things that you attract as
Mm.
well. It's
Just
it's
opportunities that
it
this, the,
totally.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it is so important, and
Mm.
you feel good about things. You feel more positive about
Mm.
things, and then that in turn is
Mm.
then a chain effect or a
Yeah.
domino effect. You know, it's yeah,
100%.
it is
Yeah.
really important.
Emily,
Mm.
earlier you said we should finish on the
The
prayer,
Queen's Prayer,
the
didn't I?
Queen's Prayer. Can we wrap up with the Queen's Prayer? I think that would be a really beautiful way to finish the conversation.
And then I can go to my crying baby after the Queen's prayer.
Oh,
Then you
sorry.
can go back
Oh,
to.
we
No,
didn't
no,
get
no. It's
the crying baby.
she's with her dad. She's absolutely fine. She's just she's
She
just
Oh,
just
worried.
wants
that's
you more.
distracting mode.
Yeah.
Well done for sitting in this because that's hard.
She's at the stage where she's really found her voice. And so sometimes I'm like, is that
Good
a cry or
girl.
is that just like a general
I'm just practicing your recall.
shriek? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, my kids. Yeah. Okay. A Queen's Prayer. A queen nourishes herself deeply, and not because she should, because she's worth it. She prioritizes her nervous system over any household chores. She knows her feelings are valid, but also not her. She operates from a place of deep worthiness and not fear. She moves like she loves herself. A queen knows and cherishes her self-care. A queen loves her body in its wholeness. A queen knows her self-conscious and unconscious. A queen gets in the arena and is brave and bold. When a queen falls or forgets she's a queen, she finds other queens to remind her how powerful she is. She dusts off her crown and polishes it once more. A queen rests when she needs to, and even when she doesn't. A queen knows and honours her emotional triggers and shows up anyway. Her queen energy has a ripple effect on her family, friends, and the planet. A queen pushes back on the mean voices in her head. A queen knows she's enough. A queen embraces all phases of her life with honour, grace, and knows how powerful her body is, no matter its age or stage. A queen honours her cycle, and a queen brings her the most untamed version of herself. And a queen's cup is always overflowing. Slay queen.
Beautiful.
I love that so
Yes.
much. Oh, to the queens.
It was
To
on
the
Yes.
theory this
queen.
morning. I said it this morning at the Women's Health Forum, and everyone's like, bah! Like, yeah, we all need that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Thank you so much for your
A
time,
pleasure.
Emily. You've been
It's an honour and a privilege.
amazing.
Thank
And you've
you.
also solved some problems for Hannah and I.
Yeah,
So
we're
So
so
in
many
an
problems.
hour and 20 minutes that we've been talking. So
only too happy to bring forward our own case studies.
Yeah, love that. Some real live coaching there.
yeah,
Love
I love
Yeah.
it.
it.
Oh, that's amazing. Emily, thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
yeah, again, we'll put in the show notes the links that we talked about today, how
Awesome.
to get in touch with Emily and follow her. And you had some information that you're going to send to us, Emily.
Yes,
So
I
we'll
will do
make
that.
sure it's all there for our queens.
Thank
So
you.
everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. And we'll be back in
Pleasure.
your ears next week. And take
Pleasure.
care of yourselves. Where can we
Yeah.
find the Queen's Prayer?
I'll put it in the show notes.
Ah,
Perfect.
right
Everything's in the
there.
show notes.
Everything's in the show notes.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Take care,
you.
guys. Mate wa.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Untidy. If you enjoyed it, we would really love your help to support us to continue to make the show. Things you can do that make a huge difference is subscribing to the show so you never miss an episode. You can also leave us a little 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And of course, please share this podcast with your mates. It means that we can continue to build this community, keep putting out untidy episodes, and just keep doing what we love to do.
And don't forget to check out mybigmoments.com for kids' books that make your tricky job of parenting just a whole lot easier. Untidy listeners get a discount at checkout, so just pop in Untidy for 10% off your order when you check out. And lastly, we would like to thank all of the good people that make this podcast possible: Flicker Williams and Joe Rocker at My Big Moments for the beautiful artwork and design, and Maxine London Creative for editing this episode. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon. Mate wa.